All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Jinhua Zhao, Professor of City and Transportation Planning at MIT. Welcome to the MIT Mobility Forum, which is curated by the MIT Mobility Initiative. It's designed to showcase the state-of-the-art transportation research across the institute and beyond. The forum reached about 12,000 people across the globe. And each week, we invite one speaker to share with us their thought. Today is actually the last session for the spring 2023 season of the forum. It's really my great pleasure to have Professor Charlie Fine join us, share his thought on entrepreneurship in the automobile industry. Right. For a long time, automobile industry represented the American innovation and entrepreneurship. Right. So for a while, it was getting a little bit bland, etc. But now there's argument that this entrepreneurship is returning to that. Right. So Professor Fine will share with us his thought on this, and particularly using the electric vehicle as an example to illustrate this point, right? Before I formally introduce Professor Fine, I do want to emphasize a few norms of this forum. First of all, audio off, video on, so that we have a more interactive session. Secondly, more importantly, is in this forum, we expect everybody to contribute one idea, either in the form of question to Professor Fine or a comment to the presentation, right? You can type your comments or question in the chat. So the expectation is everybody contribute idea. And we find that the chat, we compile them, become a very valuable resources. Yes, right. So also as a warm-up exercise, I'd like to invite everybody to type your organization, city, and local time in the chat to give Professor Fine a context of who the audience is. So here I will go MIT, Cambridge. About to all known. Great, thank you for putting your organization, local city there. Yeah, Charlie, hopefully that gives you a sense of who the audience are, where they come from, etc. So quite a diverse and international audience. Yeah. So Charlie Fine is the Chrysler leader for Global Operation Professor of Management at MIT Sloan School. Since 2015, has served as the president and CEO of the Asian School of Business, which is a collaboration between MIT and Malaysia Central Bank. His research focused on quality management, flexible manufacturing, supply chain management, and the value chain roadmap, with a particular focus on the fast clock speed manufacturing industries. He actually wrote a book titled Clock Speed, Winning Industry Control in the Age of Temporary Advantage. This book quickly became one of the classics in the management field. Professor Fine's work has supported supply chain design and improvement for companies in electronics, automobile, aerospace, communication, and consumer product. His work also examines the outsourcing dynamics in the complex industry value chains. Most recently has worked in the area of operation strategy for early stage entrepreneurial organizations. Has served on the board of directors for Greenfield Technology Corporation, a biotechnology company he co-founded, which focused on the renewable energy here. He also wrote the book Faster, Smarter, and Greener, the Future of a Car and Urban Mobility, which is specifically on the transportation industry there. So without further ado, let's welcome Professor Charlie Fine. Charlie, the forum is yours.
Thank you, Jinhua, and thank you to the MMI forum for inviting me. I'm going to share my slides, and hopefully that shows up.
Yeah. Yes, we can see it well.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go. Okay, so my title. There we go. So I want to talk about entrepreneurship. I want to talk about the automotive industry, and I want to talk about electric vehicle charging in particular. I'll start off by just saying I'm going to present some models, and I want to note that all models are wrong. So everything I'll present to you in terms of a model will be wrong, but some are useful. And so I'm hoping that that some of these models may be useful, and we'll see how that goes. So the first model that's wrong but potentially useful is a model that many of you, I'm sure, have seen, the innovation S-curve. I interpret the innovation S-curve to suggest that social, economic, and technical change does not occur smoothly, that sometimes we get, if you will, radical innovations or disruptive innovations that dramatically improve the performance of some system or some technology or some process or some organization. And sometimes we get long periods of continuous incremental improvement, but nothing radical or dramatic. And this gets represented as shown. There's a phenomena that we refer to called worse before better. That is, the beginning of the next curve is below the performance of the previous curves, to suggest that when you're starting up something new, oftentimes you got to debug it, but eventually it might get better. And I'll note that one of our MIT colleagues, Jim Utterback, is one of the people who worked in this space and stimulated some of this kind of thinking, which goes back much farther than that as well. But it's an imperfect. The picture's so beautiful. The model has to be wrong, obviously, but maybe it's useful for thinking about periods of innovation that are dramatic, and then periods of innovation which are incremental. And when Genois said for a while it seemed like the automotive industry was a little, I think his word was, a little bland. There are lots of continuous incremental improvement, but maybe nothing particularly radical going on. And now maybe with electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles, a little more radical stuff is happening. So my first imperfect model. Second imperfect model is another S-curve. So I'm going to call this the adoption S-curve. And here, the vertical axis is market penetration. So in the previous model, the vertical axis was performance. So you're getting more performance in terms of some system capability we care about. Here, we're just talking about the adoption of some new process, new technology, new product. And it's also claimed often to follow this S-curve kind of a pattern. And there's a lot of literature on this as well, that when a product is first introduced, it may not have a lot of volume or a lot of market penetration, but over time, you get saturation, you get to a point of saturation. And that connects to what we might call the product life cycle, that one product might become popular, have high market penetration, but then the next generation of the product or the next innovation comes along, if you will, and the first one goes down and the next one comes back up. Okay, so those are two models that relate to innovation that are wrong but maybe useful. And there's lots of people who've tried to estimate what these curves might look like for a variety of different innovations that include, on this chart, flush toilet, running water, refrigerators, radios, computers, smartphones, cars, et cetera, et cetera. And so people try to estimate these kinds of curves. If we look at transportation, the blue line, this is 120 years of data. The blue line here is horses, and you can see horses did decline from the late 1800s to the early 1900s. The red line is automobiles, and they're not exactly an S, but you get growth in use. The green line is airplanes, very nice curve. The purple line is walking. Americans, this is American data. Americans don't walk as much as they used to. But you don't see beautiful S's here, but you do see some of the dynamics of the end of one generation, the beginnings of new generations. So I'm going to take these two imperfect models and build a third. So I want to note that in each of these models, we have this S pattern, one vertical axis being performance, the other one being quantity or sales or market penetration, whatever it might be. And my third imperfect model, I want to lay these two curves right on top of each other and suggest that over time, an innovation life cycle has both, for successful innovation, market penetration, that is, we get a quantity growth, but also improvement in the capability or the performance of the product or the technology or the process or whatever we're thinking about. So I want to combine these two models into one S. And then on top of that, I want to lay an organizational model. The organizational model asks, well, what goes on in organizations during the course of this dynamic? And I'm going to propose 3 phases that I'm going to call nail it, scale it, and sail it. Okay. And so what I mean by nail it is in the early part of the life cycle, people are just trying to figure out what this product or this technology or this process might be. Can we nail the product idea, nail the value proposition, nail the business model, nail the value chain, figure it out in some sense, proof of concept. If one is successful in, if you will, nailing the value proposition and all those components, then there's the opportunity to scale it, that is to grow the volume and continue to grow the performance till a point of saturation or maturity where you might be sailing it. And I want to suggest a few metaphors for that. So the nail it phase, I want to analogize to a trek in the jungle. That for those of you who have ever taken a trek in the jungle, one feature of walking in the jungle is you can't see around the corners very far. So you have this idea that you have an objective, but if you're going through the jungle, you don't see very far ahead of you, and there can be hazards. You go around one corner and you may run into a tiger. You may go around another corner and you may run into a snake pit, whatever it might be. And that's life as a startup, trying to figure out your value proposition, trying to figure out your business, your technology. You don't know what's around the next corner. There's a lot of uncertainty, and it's a little bit like trying to find this path in the jungle. On the other hand, once you've kind of figured it out, you've nailed it, you've got the value proposition that works, then you want to scale it, you want to grow. And so in some sense, now you see where you want to go. You see the mountain peak, if you will, but you've got to marshal resources and capabilities in order to grow the market, grow the capabilities, and achieve the objective, which might be to produce in volume or deliver in volume, whatever it is that your innovation was. And then the third phase, we're calling sail it. And sail it is a period of maybe more stability. You're not growing 20% a year, 25% a year. Maybe you're only growing at the rate of GDP. So it's more of a level playing field, if you will. The sea is relatively level. Now the sea also has waves and storms, so it doesn't necessarily mean life is calm all the time. But you're not. But the sets of challenges you face are different, which I'll go into in a second. And this is laid out in a paper reference at the bottom. And thank you, Sergey Naumov, for joining the talk. One of my co-authors on this paper. So let me note that it may also be the case that different personalities may be better suited to different stages of the innovation life cycle. That the kind of person who's good at risk-taking in the jungle may be very, very different from the kind of person who's a caretaker of a mature organization with a mature product and a mature market. And so we talk about in the paper, there are different personalities. There are nailers, there are scalers, there are sailors, and maybe in between, organizers who help you move from nailing to scaling, and stabilizers who help you move from scaling to sailing. So the idea here is that the organizational challenges are different at these different stages. Maybe the kind of people and the kind of teams that you need are different as well. So how do you nail it? You want to establish a validated value proposition that works for all members of the value chain. So it's got to work for the customers, it's got to work for the employees, it's got to work for the suppliers, the distributors, the investors, et cetera. Otherwise, you don't have a viable value proposition yet. And so that's the jungle journey, if you will, trying to figure out what is our product, our market, our business model, et cetera. And so this is usually a event in many situations. Startups have relatively little in terms of resources and assets. So you may have a founder, a small founder team, a little bit of venture capital. You don't have a lot of tools to go into this jungle. It's not like an army going to the jungle. It's like, gee, me and my machete and my mosquito repellent, got to work my way through this jungle and hope I find something useful and find the path that I want. Okay, so again, a metaphor. So what's the nail it environment like? Well, the environment is ambiguous, uncertain, risk prone. You have to do a lot of iteration. You have to have a tolerance for uncertainty, be good at rapid problem solving. So you go around the corner in the jungle, you run into a tiger, you can't say, oh, let's refer this problem to the committee and see if the committee comes back with a solution. You've got to deal with that tiger when it's in front of you. Relatively flat structure, etc. So you have to be fast and agile, frugal, because you probably don't have a lot of resources. You have to be willing to iterate. Have to have a high tolerance for uncertainty, be able to solve problems quickly, and be willing to pivot and say, gee, this is the wrong path, we got to switch paths. So the kind of people you want and the kind of people who are attracted to this kind of challenge tend to be entrepreneurial, risk tolerant, resourceful generalists. You don't have enough resources to hire a specialist for every function. Solutions hackers who are optimistic and mission driven and prepared to pivot, and sometimes rule breakers, people who say, gee, we have to try to do some follow paths people haven't been followed before. Okay, so it's a characterization of what life is like in the nail it stage, if you will. So what's scale it like? Okay, so we nailed our value proposition. We have a business model. We have a product that people want to buy. We can make a profit on it, we think. So how do we scale it? How do we grow? And scale it requires scaling on two sides. You have to scale the market. You have to grow the set of customers who are willing to buy your product or use your process, et cetera. And you've got to grow your capability to produce and deliver that product or service. So a quote here from Bill Aulett, one of my colleagues at MIT. He says, the very behavior that makes you successful to get a startup from 0 to 10 million in revenue is very likely the same that will make you unsuccessful when the company gets to be 50 or 100 million. So those are big numbers by my standards, not by the automotive industry standard, however. And what we tell our MBA students is the mark of a really successful startup CEO is that he or she gets fired. That is, you're really successful, and then they bring in a professional CEO, if you will, because the skills required are often different. That's not always true, but it often happens that way. So the scaling environment, you have more certainty. You kind of know what the product is. You know what the market looks like. You know features you want to offer. But you have to build an organization, build processes, build hierarchy, set up committees, etc. So you're marshaling resources. I wrote here professionalization. So now we presumably have the resources and the desire and the need to hire professionals. We need a professional marketing person, a professional procurement person, a professional finance person, professional manufacturing people, and a professional IT group, on and on and on. And we do automation, process control, try to create reproducibility, cultural consistency, and raise more money. So different kinds of people, perhaps, team players who are more systematic, more specialized, open to group decision-making as opposed to decision-making on the fly, driven by growth and collective problem solving. So how do you scale? So on the left, I put scaling without tools, naked scaling. So there's somebody scaling a mountain and not a lot of tools there. On the right side, might be more systematic in terms of how you scale. Again, the metaphor of climbing the mountain, but our proposition. So let me lay out the challenge here on scaling with a quote. So here's a relatively famous nailer who says, "I don't believe in process." I wrote underneath, pictured above, entrepreneur who slept in his factories for 3 years. So this is a guy who is not very process oriented, who's a nailer doing scaling, and he slept in his factory for 3 years. That is, I would say that's consistent with what I would call naked scaling. That is, not a lot of tools, not a lot of systemization, hacking your way through, still hacking your way through the jungle when you really need to be growing. And I don't think that's the easy way to do it. In contrast, Ben Horowitz, famous venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, says, when you scale, you have to begin to specialize. You have to begin to create organizational structures. You have to be able to create processes. to the nailing team, that might feel like going backward a little bit because we're not going as fast. But he asserts you have to be much more systematic if you're going to scale successfully. So you go from having limited tools to having lots of tools. And in the paper, we describe 10 scaling tools, which I'm not going to go through in detail. I know I'm burning most of my time here, Jinhua, so I'm going to end fairly soon. So we talk in this paper about processification, the need to build processes, professionalization, hire professionals, bring them in, automation, platformization, segmentation, you have to segment the market, acculturation, build a common culture, capitalization, continue to raise capital, collaboration, you got to build out your supply chain relationships, your distribution channel relationships, replication, how do we replicate what we've done again and again in different parts of the world for different markets, et cetera, and evaluation, how do we create measurement systems. So this is expanded on in the paper, but we think the opposite of naked scaling is scaling with tools, and we do think there are tools that one can use to be systematic as you grow, as you scale up the market and the production capability. Okay, so now let me switch to EVs very, very quickly. So I just have a few quotes from a few news articles. The first one says that EV makers collectively plan to invest about $860 billion in this decade to bring batteries and vehicles into the marketplace. And as some examples, Ford says they're going to spend $50 billion through 2026. General Motors says they're going to spend $35 billion through 2025. Toyota says they're going to spend $35 billion through 2030. And so you've got this, if you will, there's a freight train here. These are sailing companies. These are mature companies that have mature processes that know how to scale and sail. They know how to build. If you say, okay, you're going to have to start producing millions of electric vehicles, these large mature companies know how to do that. They know how to produce in volume. They know how to scale. And I'll put the link in the paper in a moment. Or maybe Sergey, if you could put a link to the paper, that'd be great. So we've got this, if you will, freight train moving that's going at high speed, preparing to produce millions of electric vehicles, spending hundreds of billions of dollars to do so. And these are the sailing companies for the most part. I mean, aside from Tesla, it's all the mature companies who have mature processes, who know what they're doing and can produce in volume. But at the same time, the charging network, at least outside in the United States, aside from Tesla. So I'm going to confine myself to a public charging network that's not Tesla's network. Just as a data point, this article from the LA Times, a guy writes about his electric car. I love my electric car. I love what it does. I love everything about it, except I can't charge it. At the bottom in blue, after 3 years, I'm going to trade it in. Why? I love the car, but I can't travel around California because I'm not confident that I'm going to be able to charge it when I need to. And he says, yeah, there are a lot more stations, but there's a lot more vehicles vying for them. There are lots of parts of the state that don't have chargers. He says in 2020, only half the chargers work. Now it's still about a quarter of the chargers in the Bay Area that don't work. And he says they're not easy to find. The apps help, but they're not perfect. He goes to a charging station, all the chargers are in use, so they're blocked by chargers that aren't being used. The chargers are offline, they're non-functional, they shut down in the middle of a charge. He said, I waste time having to backtrack, so go from one station to another because one didn't work. I not only have to wait for the charge to happen, but I have to wait because the chargers are going too slow. They're not delivering enough electricity. I also I had to download a half a dozen apps because each charger company has its own app, and an unhappy customer. Right? So California has the densest, highest density of chargers in the United States, and very, very unhappy customers, if you will. So where are we? In some sense, I think the charging business, public charging companies are nailing it. They don't have they don't have a business model that works yet. They haven't figured out their supply chains. They haven't figured out their customer value proposition. They haven't figured out the technology standards. It's a very, very immature domain. Whereas you've got the auto companies who are mature, sailing companies, and they're going to produce these millions of EVs. And the question is, are they going to be able to be charged? And is anybody going to be willing to buy them once they realize how bad the charging network is? And so I'm going to end here and just say, so here's the challenge I think that that this industry faces, that we're going to have the ability to produce and deliver millions of EVs. It's not clear we're going to have the ability to charge them. That's a huge, huge mismatch. And you can't just throw money at the problem. So the US government is throwing money at the problem, but the nail it process in these startup companies has to go through its challenges of iterating to find the right business model, to find the right technologies, to find the right ways to work as successful companies with successful value propositions before they can scale it and deliver the charging capability that the auto industry is going to need. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, and I guess Jinhua is going to ask me questions, and then we've got lots of comments in the chat.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much, Charlie, on this. Yeah. So here are the two parts. One part is the entrepreneurship principles, this process to nail, scale, sale. Another part is how does it like translate into the electric vehicle broader industry, and specifically on the charging network as well, right? On the first part, I also noted Robin Chase here. She's herself is an entrepreneur. And also now being also an important critique of the electric vehicle industry there. Robin, if you're there, may I invite you to just have a few remarks to Charlie's talk, and before I start questions for Charlie. Yeah,
Robin? Hi, Charlie. You probably didn't read, but I did say, yeah, that nail it, scale it, sale it does seem completely right. And your attributes that you attributed to the nail it part felt so on target for me as I had built Zipcar. Thinking about this charging piece, it is an intriguing thing you pointed out, and the fact that 25% are broken and don't work. I wanted to mention that Gabe Klein, who I hired to run Zipcar DC, is now in charge of the US government's charging station effort. And I feel like he's probably forgotten what that had to look like, and I'll have to remind him, but he is certainly working on it. And the place where I think in your thesis and trying to be optimistic is the right companies can learn very fast. So there's no reason why they can't correct those scaling problems in shortish order. Guess that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Robin. You may recall that you gave a guest lecture in my class 15 or 20 years ago. You had left Zipcar, yeah. And thank you for that.
I hope I was consistent. Yeah.
Well, we've all learned a lot since that time, but thank you for that, and thank you for the comments.
Good. Thanks, Robin. Yeah. So Charlie, I will start maybe from the EV charging network part, right? So as we've been discussing many months of a year now, the reality of the non-Tesla charging network in the United States, put it simply, it just doesn't work now. It doesn't work, right? So here I would like you to share with us, what do you see as the kind of main sources of this messiness, right? I mean, of course, there's some complexity in it. I mean, there's an energy system need to talk to each other, information system talk to each other, a payment system talk to each other. But I mean, we have other equivalent complex system that works in US, right? And also for the fact of charging, Tesla system works, right? Yeah. So that technology complexity cannot really explain this messiness. So what do you learn from it?
So first of all, if you think about the Tesla network does work, as I believe. And I think in that sense, as much as I kind of took a poke at Elon Musk is like a Henry Ford visionary. Henry Ford realized he had to build the whole value chain for cars. He didn't just design the Model T, he designed the Model T factories, and he owned car factories, parts factories, steel mills, rubber plantations, shipping lines, on and on and on, because he built out the whole value chain, and Tesla built and Elon built out the whole value chain for EVs that included obviously the batteries and the charging stations. The rest of the industry hasn't, and I think it's because of this. You might call it the chicken and the egg problem, that if you're a startup company in the charging business, if there aren't that many EVs out there, you're not going to be making much money, and that doesn't give you the capital to continue to invest and grow. So they need to wait until they have revenue before they can grow further. But on the other hand, why should anybody buy an electric car if they don't think they're going to be able to charge it? And obviously, for people who have suburban homes, they can put a charger in their garage and they'll be fine. But for people who don't have fixed parking spaces and have to rely on the public network, there is this chicken and the egg problem that they can't buy an EV unless they know how they're going to be able to charge it. And the charging companies can't build out their networks unless they know they're going to get the revenue. And I think the government realizes this, and they're priming the pump with lots of money going to these EV charging companies. But then there's the organizational maturity question of it's going to take them time to nail the their business models and figure out how to run a successful business in this domain, and then build it out. And then on top of that, you've got standards, or having for a driver to have 6 different apps, or gee, my car doesn't fit in the plug here or there, or the software doesn't talk to my credit card software, doesn't talk to this charger's charging network software. All kinds of challenges, connectivity standards, technical issues that have to be worked out as well.
Yeah. So to address these difficulties, do you think that a typical market mechanism will just somehow sort it out, right? Again, you take any industry, there are a lot of complexities. In many industries, there's not much intervention. Somehow the market just working magic. But in this case, do you think that will work, or actually we need something additional?
Market mechanisms don't always work. I mean, and government subsidies don't always work. So the government has had a war on drugs, a war on poverty, a war on this and that, and with varying success, right? So markets don't solve all problems, and over time things will get better, I think. But the issue is time. That my sense is that the auto companies are moving at a very fast pace, that they're going to pour out millions of EVs in the near future, and we're not ready to charge them. I mean, over time it will work itself out, but presumably, but the speed mismatches seems to be fairly dramatic, and that could stifle the growth, in the sense that if customers get discouraged and say, I bought an EV and I'm frustrated with it because I can't charge it, or I'm not going to buy an EV until I have greater confidence, then all this auto company investment is going to not see the return that they're expecting, and that could reduce their investment. And so that chicken and the egg problem might go in the opposite direction.
Yes, if you look at the key players in this, right? Clearly there's the car makers, there's the charging networks, there's the infrastructure, there's the grid, there's the local government, right? So here, if this thing do not solve itself quickly, who gets hurt first? Who has the really like intrinsic motivation to do something quickly on this, right?
So everybody gets hurt. I mean, I think the deep-pocketed players and the high-capability players are the major auto companies, right? I think that they probably have the capital and the capital resources and the human resources to build networks if they chose. Now, the auto companies might be thinking, well, we didn't have to build gas stations, and everybody gets gas from their gas stations. Why should we have to build the charging networks? But you had Rockefeller building gas. Rockefeller was the oil titan, and he provided the fuel way back when, right? There's nobody doing that right now with that kind of capability. So I think the auto companies are probably ought to feel that pain, anticipate that pain, and probably have to invest more aggressively, maybe in these small charging companies. Not only, I mean, you look at what say General Motors buying Cruise automation. So General Motors sees the potential of Cruise and says, with our resources, we can grow Cruise. And maybe Cruise couldn't have grown without General Motors resources. And maybe it's not a great analogy, but if a GM or a Ford or the other big players, and I think Mercedes has said they're going to do this, said we're going to use our resources and our capabilities to make sure this thing gets built out, that might be the fastest way to have it happen.
Thanks. Yeah. Maybe lastly from me, and then I'll give it to John for the audience question there. It's more of an international perspective here, right? Beside your work in the US, you also have a lot of experience with the European market. You taught the Volkswagen the professional education. You were in Asia for many years. So how do you see the different parts of the world? They're growing not in sync, right? They created a lot of variation in the geography between different countries. Where do you see as the kind of better models? Why they're more successful in many ways?
Yeah. So I do think, as you point out, Europe is ahead of the United States with regard to building out a public charging network and having that work. I sense that there's, and I haven't studied the European market as that closely, but my sense is there's much more, there was an earlier recognition and more collaboration across government and industry to begin to build this network in advance of need. And I think China is another place where obviously EV penetration is growing very quickly, and you may have a heavier hand to the government basically making sure that this happens. But I think both Europe and China can suggest that it's doable. It's clearly doable. But the US tends to be much more sort of free market oriented and startup oriented, and startups are great. And I think the fact that the United States is host to many, many creative entrepreneurial companies is a wonderful thing for the American economy and American innovation. But the challenges here of coordination and speed seem to be not aligned with the speed at which the auto companies are going to turn out large volumes of EVs.
Thanks, Charlie. Jeff?
Thanks so much, Charlie. Lots of questions in the chat. I just want to start out maybe with 2 points from my side. So, the first is, I would wonder, do you see any analogies with other mature industries where there is a type of technological disruption, and it's almost like you see like the same story being told over again? So I don't know, for example, the transition from film photography, where there is a very well-established camera industry and a film industry, and then to digital photography. Somehow we ended up with a standard around digital photographs for a file standard. Do you see anything like that you think you're having flashbacks to other work that you've done?
Well, I think in photography, Kodak played the role of Henry Ford. That is, they developed the cameras and the film and the developing processes, vertically integrated. We're going to build out a whole value chain, which is what, as I said, I think Elon has done with Tesla and what Henry Ford did. I think maybe a better analogy might be when the United States moved to unleaded gasoline in the 1970s. So when we moved from leaded gasoline to unleaded gasoline, first of all, you had the government basically pushing it along and encouraging it. And those days, the American government was maybe more aligned or less divisive than it is today. But you did have the oil companies needing to be able to transition to unleaded gas and deliver that unleaded gas to thousands of gas stations around the country. You had the car companies who had to all have automobiles that could burn unleaded gas. You had to have the gas caps and the guns that shoot the gas into the, I can't think of the term, into the car. They were a different size, so you couldn't put leaded gas into an unleaded car. So there was a high level of coordination across the oil industry, the automotive industry, government regulators, and all the operators who operated fueling stations around the country. So that was doable. I was young at the time. I'm not sure exactly how that was coordinated, but it may be a case study worthy of more study.
Okay. You touched a little bit on the kind of the economics, like it is tough to make money in charging. And, if you look at the financials of a company like ChargePoint, it's not looking particularly good. I wonder, if do you feel that that's just because we're at this early nail it stage and we haven't found a business model that works? And before you get to sort of your response to that, I think what's interesting about electric vehicle charging is that so much of it depends on where the customer parks her vehicle, right? So if we have the privilege of having a dedicated garage where we can install a home charger, then you're paying for electricity at perhaps 20 cents a kilowatt hour. So my colleague Bhuvan did some very interesting, very just back of envelope calculations where, here in Massachusetts, you may be paying about 60 cents a kilowatt hour to use a public charger. So when you do the math on that, you could actually be paying more to operate an electric vehicle per mile than an equivalent sized gasoline vehicle. So then you get into these whole things of we're basically penalizing people who don't have the luxury of installing a home charger, if you will, because they don't have a dedicated parking space. They have to park on street. So that's a lot of stuff there. I just wonder what your reactions might be.
Yeah. So if you first ask why is it hard for the charging companies to make money? And I think the volumes are low, and the operating costs at low scale are probably high, right? So the scale economies have not kicked in yet, and there's a lot of learning. I think to get low prices, you need competition also. So it's not good enough that there's just one charger in each town. You look at the way gasoline stations are laid out, everybody has a choice of which gasoline station I'm going to go to, and the gasoline stations post their prices, and many people go to the lowest price. And so until we have competition like that, it's not likely perhaps that we should expect the price of electricity sold at these charging stations to be competitive, if you will. So that's as it's not just a question of one company scaling. We need the industry to scale. That is, multiple companies that compete with each other have to scale up and compete to drive down the sales prices. So it's a very immature industry. It's not ready for super high volumes of EVs, but the world is ready in some sense. That is, we want to reduce carbon emissions. As I said, the auto companies are gearing up, and the charging infrastructure just seems not ready, not only technologically but organizationally.
Super. So getting to the questions. So Evangelos Simoudis, who's a mobility thought leader, he's written a book on future mobility. He touched on two questions. So one of the first one is basically, should the OEMs do this? Should the vehicle manufacturers do this? I think you touched on that a little bit with your discussion about Tesla, but if there's more you want to add, please do. And then the second was about how do you involve the utilities in this process? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So with regard to the question of whether OEMs should do it, I'm not in the business of telling OEMs what they should do, but I do think they have a lot at risk. That is, that they're spending billions and billions of dollars to produce these cars, and I don't think they can afford an epic failure of people don't buy them because there's no charging infrastructure. So I'm sure that the auto company CEOs are worrying about this, and if they're waiting for the startups to kind of build out rapidly, they may be waiting longer than they hope to wait, and that's a challenge, right? Second part of your question was,
Related to the utilities.
All right, so the utilities. So as I understand it, there in our 50 states, there are 50 different sets of regulations that relate to how electricity might pass and at what prices it might pass from the electric grids to these potential charging stations. So obviously, you mentioned earlier home charging, and it's well established how the network works and how the pricing works for charging at home. But for these startup companies who are building out these networks, they probably all have to negotiate with the electric companies, and how that negotiation goes is a function of the regulatory environment. So just think, each charging company has to have a set of lawyers who understands the laws in each of these 50 states. That's a lot for a startup company to have to build out, right? So we need the legal infrastructure, the organizational legal infrastructure to help these companies as well. So lots of work there. It's not going to happen overnight, I think.
Charlie, there were a couple of questions about battery swap. And so, Robin referred back to the sort of legacy of Shai Agassi, and, the failure at the time of A Better Place. There's a new company called Amply. Their founder, one of their leaders was recently at MIT, John D'Souza. Very interesting. There's a lot of stuff going on in China with NIO and battery swap. Do you have any thoughts on that? And maybe I would just preface this question with, there's battery swap and then there's standardized battery swap, right? So when we change the batteries in our flashlight, it's a standardized battery swap, and you can purchase those batteries in any retail outlet. But when we change the battery, perhaps in our cell phone, it's not a standard battery swap; it's a proprietary swap. So, with that framework, just any thoughts on battery swap?
So that, from where we are today, that feels like a pretty painful pivot, right? Because the auto companies are not coordinating on battery design right now, and the auto companies are all making their own designs for their vehicles with their own battery designs. At least at Tesla, I suspect batteries are considered to be a strategic advantage. I think General Motors also, and probably other companies as well. So we're a long, long way. I think we're farther down the trail to get public charging right than we are to back up and go to battery swapping, standardized battery swapping. And if you have non-standardized battery swapping, that is, every car company has their own battery design, my guess is it's going to be very, very hard to get scale economies on any aspect of that value chain. And that'll be even a harder lift. So I think that we missed that train. As you noted, A Better Place failed for a variety of reasons, obviously. But to back up and try that path strikes me as enormously difficult in terms of value chain coordination and investment needs.
Super. Okay. Let's see. I'm just scanning the chat right now there was a very interesting commentary answering the question about the economics of charging that I encourage everyone to have a look in the chat. Bhuvan, I'm wondering if you can maybe jump in if you see a question that I'm missing as I scan through the chat here.
I see both Kara and John Niall. Kara, if you're here, you can feel free to jump in and add your remarks. I see some of your comments very interesting. If you can speak up, I'll put you in there. Kara?
Yeah.
Or John Niles, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah,
fascinating presentation, Professor, and you've got a lot of it right. Electric charging outside of the Tesla empire is really a mess. And I run into a lot of people at charging stations who really wish they had a hybrid. And so I think hybrids are might do better than we think. And as I say, the climate warriors really hate the idea because, you know, it's perpetuating with gasoline, but here I am. But thank you for a good show. There's a lot of good stuff here. I urge everybody to save the chat. 3 dots at the bottom.
Great. Thanks, John. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just jump in with a question from Wolfgang Gruhl, which is where would you see mobility as a service offerings like vehicle sharing, you know, Zipcar, City Bike, etc., or intermodal traffic companions on the nail it, scale it, sail it framework? So this is a very interesting diversion away from electric vehicles, talking about mobility as a service. So much talk about this, you know, several years ago. Not sure we're getting the liftoff that some of us had hoped for. Any thoughts on that, Charlie, how it fits in with that framework?
Well, so let me connect it actually to the electric vehicles. So as you know, John, we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we had a guest from the MBTA, the Boston Mass Transit organization, and he was talking about electric bus charging, and he said we have this big facility where we charge all our buses. We have professionals who run the charging. We've negotiated with an electric company, et cetera, et cetera. So imagine Uber fleets being run the same way. That now Uber doesn't own all their cars, but Uber could presumably say, okay, we're going to set up a big charging station for our Uber fleet, and we're going to build out our own charging network, and then we're going to deploy all these electric vehicles for mobility as a service, and maybe eliminate private ownership or dramatically reduce private ownership. So some centralized player like Uber maybe could speed this along if they said, well, we're going to provide a large fraction of the EVs on the road, and we're going to use our scale to build scalable charging stations, if you will, for the fleet in each city that we operate in every city. And that doesn't solve all the problems, but maybe it's helpful. Obviously, Uber and ride sharing has solved the scaling problem to a very significant degree. That we're in a different place in EVs, I think.
Great. Yeah, we're reaching the limits of the forum now. So please join me. Thank Professor Charlie Fan for the presentation and the conversation. Thank you so much, Charlie. That's
Thank you.
Great. Yeah. So we'll compile all the questions. I hopefully will share with you afterwards offline on this. Yeah. So I will take the last 3 or 4 minutes or so, given this the last session of this year's forum. I want to give a quick overview here. So we started with Professor Alan Kronhauser talking about the automation technology applied to the transit network, right? Then we had Professor Hani Mamasani talk about the telemobility and the new normal because of the hybrid work, right? And then Liz and David talk really about the federal government, the 3 major acts, how do they impact or are going to impact the American infrastructure and transportation and also the society in general here. Then we have Professor Juan de Dios Altoza talk about specific model innovation, specifically try to capture the habit and perceptions of travel behavior. Robin Chase, who is here today, also give a talk about the case against the sole focus of electrification in solving the multiple objective of the transportation industry and the society problem. Professor Warren Powell talked about from more the methodological point of view of the unifying the reinforcement learning through this sequential decision-making framework there, right? And Philip Kopman discussed the safety angle, asked the question, how safe is safe enough for autonomous vehicles to be acceptable and large-scale deployed in the society? Professor John Walker take an angle of how do we a bunch of academics here, we talk about our papers, citation, how to translate that into the real meaningful wisdom to the society and translate into the actual impact on the ground, right? Then we had a panel organized by Professor Andrew Selfsuit, Peter Norton, and Chris Carter, really discuss, in the set overall, we had almost 3 years of a session now. We have a lot of technology discussion, autonomous vehicle, electrification, like Charlie's discussing today. But how about pedestrians, right? Are we really forgetting about it? Who take care of the pedestrian environment and encourage the walking? And then Matthias Winkelbach talked about from the freight and logistics side, what's the innovation there and how this algorithm can really help push for the last mile logistic. Then Hamza Balakrishna really discussed the advanced air mobility situation. That also, I find that the challenge there share a lot of similar structure as today what Charlie mentioned about the electric vehicle messiness. There is also a broader system integration question and different parts need to coordinate in this. Then last week, I invited a group of students from my lab talk about how AI and its impact on public transit. And today, Charlie gives a really great summary, a conclusion of this year's forum on the entrepreneurship returning to automobile industries. Right. So before I conclude, I'll just say maybe two things. One is how can we use this forum? Right. We have about 12,000 people on the list receiving this. So I'll put it this way. There's several use cases. One is I noted there are many companies and organizations actually encourage their employees to join the forum, effectively play a role of professional education, which we totally welcome. First to join and just go ahead and do it. You don't even need to ask us. Just come here, encourage employee to join. Right. The second one, a few professors from different parts of the world reach out to us is saying, can we use this as a class? Right. For that, I would say two things. One is immediately invite your student, come here, listen to the talks, learn, absorb the knowledge. But two, if you want to formalize this a little bit into an elective, right? This will be a survey class, right? Actually, I shared the syllabus at MIT. We use this forum also as a student class, as a surveying class that expose students to a variety of research topics, right? For that, I'm very happy to share the syllabus. And for any professors in anywhere in the world to use it as a class, we very much encourage, right? So, but there's one caveat though is, if you notice that the topics is a little bit ad hoc, right? A variety of topics from different speakers. So I cannot guarantee that at each session, each season of a term, I can guarantee I cover all the different parts, right? But I can guarantee is one, the continuity. We'll offer this continuously in the foreseeable future. We're designing the full 2023 session at the moment, right? Two, we'll collect this historical archive. For that, I thank Bhuvan and previous Annie really put the effort of collecting the videos, the slides, the question in the chat, the student commentary, become a meaningful set of knowledge that can be shared broadly, right? So lastly, I'll conclude by saying, at MIT, we actually these days have a very important discussion, which is we see a major disconnection between the advancements of science technology at the elite university like MIT with a layperson, the general public's view and their understanding of this. The more and more the sense of this disconnection, the irrelevance, I don't know what you guys are talking about. So here, MIT actually is trying to say that there's a duty to inform the general public. What's going on in the society, what's going on in the policy, what's going on in the technology. So I hope that this forum will play a role contributing to that part as well. Yeah. So lastly, I just to say a big thank you both today to Professor Charlie Fine, but also my partner John and Bhuvan. Bhuvan, if you don't mind, spotlight yourself. You're kindly spotlighting all of us. To join us. So John, Bhuvan have been as a team part of working together to deliver this. So thank you very much on this. And lastly, I'll just say thank all the audience for your participation and see you guys in the fall. Have a great summer. Right. Thanks, everybody.